So,
Recording progress.
welcome everyone. Welcome to the SusAF tutorial at RE 2021. All right, thanks, Matteo. And today is, in theory, a 3-hour tutorial. In practice, we will definitely break this up. We'll take some breaks in between. The discussions can sometimes take a little longer. And sometimes we will just go back to the timeline and say like, all right, let's wrap up this point, let's move on. The work that we're going through today has been developed in collaboration with Colin and a bunch of other people. You see the link to Zenodo in the chats, and we will copy that a couple of times whenever somebody new comes in because they can't see the chat history. That will bring you to the workbook that also lists all the people who contributed to this: Letizia Duboc, Sedefaki Mikochak, Christoph Becker, Stephanie Bates, Rosanna Chichian, Steve Easterbrook, Ola Leifler, Yari Porras, Norbert Seif, well, and Colin and I. So this is the accumulation of about a decade of research that we've poured into the area of sustainability. And in the background, you hear a very unsustainable tool. It's called a leaf blower. And there is an epidemic of leaf blowers all across California, predominantly working in the morning, all across the neighborhoods. So there is no way to shut them out. They're on every side. They're surrounding the building. I might put in a headset to see if that reduces the external noise.
Oh, that's nice.
Do you think it's a calming white noise in the background?
Yeah.
All right.
Doesn't bother me actually.
Good. That's good. Well, it might be louder on my end. So I would love to start with a little round of introductions. And as I always just start talking without even introducing myself and assuming that the whole world knows who I am, because I know who I am, I'm just going to add that I'm currently an associate professor at the University of Chalmers in Göteborg, Sweden. I lived and worked in California before, which is where I'm right now. Therefore, I am fairly awake right now, while you may be at the end of a long, large day or in the middle of it. And this work has come out of a decade of love and enthusiasm and dedication and frustration that we've poured into the research that we do with a focus on love and enthusiasm. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Colin, and you always get to nominate the next person to introduce themselves until we got everybody.
Hello, everybody. My name is Colin Fenters. I'm a reader in software engineering at the University of Huddersfield for the last 9 years. My journey into sustainability was more accidental than by design, but it's a sphere that I've been working in certainly for the last decade anyway, and it's taken slightly different directions from where I originally started. Along with Birgit, I'm one of the sort of founding authors of the Karlskrona Manifesto, which came out of the RE for SUSI workshop. And what do we call ourselves now? Is it the Karlskrona Alliance? Or the, I can't even, yeah. So I'm one of those sort of founding members of that group. And we've produced some interesting artifacts along the way. And I will nominate Peter.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Peter. I'm a doctoral student at the Johannes Kepler University in Linz in Austria. My supervisors are Norbert Seif and Iris Kroher. I think you know them, at least Norbert. Yeah, my doctoral topic is it targets sustainability in agile contexts, and I'm very interested in the methods you developed in the last years because I want to evaluate how they can be applied in agile context. And yeah, I do my doctoral study part-time because I'm also a software engineer and support our customers in different roles. Yeah. that's it. I give it to Matteo.
Hi, is it working now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Finally made it. So I guess I'm the outlier here. I am a principal software architect based in Berlin, Germany. I come from the industry, I work for Here Technology. It's a company which has a long-standing name in the industry in the geolocation business. We were Navtech before. Now we are, we passed briefly through Nokia. Then we became our own company. And in my role as an architect, we noticed that one thing we are particularly bad at is requirements engineering, right? We are often executing badly our programs and wasting a lot of resources because we do not qualify what's incoming from the customer, even at the initial, in the initial elicitation phase. Within this framework, my interest was also to try to englobate more non-functional requirements in the work that we do and what we consider at the beginning of many of our programs, which are often in the automotive domain. Privacy was one. I participated in the workshop before, and now I'm looking forward to sustainability, right? To try and see if we can take into account a bit more about the environment and how we treat people and all these aspects in my day-to-day job. And who is missing?
Rogart.
Robert. Yeah.
Rogart.
Rogart. Sorry.
Hello, I'm in the middle of the cooking of my food currently, you know. But I'm here today because I'm very interested in maybe using this framework for my course next year, if that's possible. That's why I'm really into it. So I think that the same framework will get shown once before in my course, I think. I'm in professor of software engineering in Bergen. So yes, that's it. I mean, is there any more? Because I just arrived 1 second ago, so I don't know what's going on. So,
well, you have to nominate someone, Rogart, and you have to guess who's the last person that hasn't spoken.
Then I have to guess who the last person because I just arrived, so I not a clue. Peter, maybe it's like next one.
No.
No, it's you. Oh, you have a difficult name. Spain. You're from Spain. João. Yes.
Okay, I'm missing. I haven't talked. Yeah, I'm João from the University of Lisbon. Yeah, and I'm just here because I'm a Birgit's fan. Not only that, it's true as well. But because I have an interest in sustainability, I've been producing some work together with Ana Moreira, Barbara Page, and Peter Kaiser, and Isabel from Portugal as well, and some students that have been doing some research on this area now, like define catalogs for sustainability, process, etc. So that's the my main interest in sustainability currently. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. Sorry, go ahead.
And then I pass to Birgit. Okay, as I said, I'm going to be in and off because I have to check the ends of the other tutorial. So.
Got it. All right. So I will paste the Zenodo link for everybody who came in a tad later. And I'm going to share my screen so you will see what you find there, which is the SusAF workbook. So let me just find the full screen view. There we go. Oh, that's very helpful. Oh, I can zoom in. Okay, perfect. Sharing screen. So welcome to the Sustainability Awareness Framework that at some point was called the Sustainability Analysis Framework. And then we got a lot of flag for wait, you're not measuring and quantifying all the impacts that you come up with. Therefore, should it really be called analysis framework? And so we scaled it back to awareness, and yet it does go beyond awareness. So it's probably somewhere in the middle, depending on who you ask about their definition of analysis, because we do provide quite a bit of content in that direction. And as you can see, this is a workbook and it's Creative Commons. You're welcome to use, pass on however you wish. In fact, you're encouraged to do so, and we'd love to hear about it. And that is the second or third version of the PDF. It does have a little bit of space to take some notes in there, not a ton. And let me, this preview is maybe not the best version to view it. I thought this was a great idea, and now I see it's the double pages, which means it shows you a lot at the same time. However, we will see the overview of the framework, and then on the right-hand side is already the first step, the warm-up and scoping. So we're going to focus on the left side for now, and I can add in the little caveats or the little correction that we're not going to stick to the suggested timing down here, because that will be for a full day workshop, which we do not have today. So we're going to do max 3 hours. Maybe we'll wrap it up a bit early, depending on how deep we want to take the discussions today and depending on where our state of being is. And the process for this entire thing is circled around there as a warm-up phase where we familiarize ourselves with how this is going to work. That's what we're doing right now. And that includes that scoping on the right-hand side, where we choose a system that we're working on. When we do this workshop with a company, then that system is usually predetermined before the workshop. Today, we get to pick what we want to work on. And then there is a capturing phase where we're going to use sets of questions and the templates, which this workbook is part of, to brainstorm, reflect, and discuss potential effects that a system could have in different dimensions of sustainability. And we'll be taking notes throughout that process. For that, we have a Miro board for the online version. And then we go into an analysis phase where we kind of summarize what we found and where we make sure that all the effects are classified into their order of effect, whether they're direct, indirect, or systemic. And we'll look back over what that means. And then we identify the chains of effects arising from what we found, which means a lot of the time, one of the effects that we find is an extrapolation of an effect in a previous order of impact. So when I have a direct impact, that could lead to a larger scale direct impact, which could lead to a larger scale systemic impact. If that's too much terminology right now, just let it move through you. We will get back to the details on that. And then we'll have a conversation around which of those effects do we want, which of those are negative, which are positive, how do we mitigate the negative ones so that they maybe don't come to pass, and how do we support the positive ones so that they actually do come through. And then that can be summarized in a report, which you find the template for at the end of this workbook. And we use these diagrams here, these radar charts, to summarize the impacts that we have found. So that's our overall outline for the day. And the big question that we can get started with is, which product or service do we wish to discuss today? Of course, we have a list of examples that we can use, and we're curious, like, what would be of specific interest to you to discuss? So is there anything, Peter or Matteo specifically, because you want to stay the entire time and maybe take something away for your specific application domain? Is there a specific application domain or system or service that you wish to discuss as an example?
If Peter has a preference, else what I can offer is a mobility as a service product. Since it's a public tender, I can talk about it. No NDA is involved in the original requirements.
That's great.
And that will be an example on my side I can use.
It's okay for me.
Wonderful. We have an example, and that's great. I've worked with mobility as a service to some extent in the past, so it's a domain that's not completely unknown to me, and I'm super curious to hear some details. Now, instead of me trying to write that here into the workbook all by myself, what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to stop the sharing and we'll move to the Miro board, and then I will have to reshare that, despite the fact that you are perfectly able to see it and are encouraged to contribute, but I'll have to reshare it so that we can see it and capture it on the recording for the people that were not able to attend and asked me to record this for them. So let's go ahead and share this new screen. Go. What's this? Somebody put a screenshot. Can I take this out? And we're going to start with the scoping phase. Yep. Frame to frame, and luckily we can zoom in forever. Scoping, not coping. I'd say that's a Freudian slip. So for the scoping, if we check the workbook, then we will see that we want to know what the vision of that product or service is that we use in our case study, and then what are the known sustainability effects. So zooming in here, there's two subparts. The system vision. And then we have the known sustainability impacts. And so this is the point in time where, Matteo, you get to brief us on what's happening here. Like what is, yeah.
Yes, I will just anonymize a little bit, but not by much. So we are talking about a metropolitan area in France, in this case, a rather big one, where we were contacted as a company to build a system which would enable users in the region, which can be either citizens, tourists, or people visiting, to move freely around and encourage the use of public transport and alternative transport methods over traditional car traffic. For instance, we have such transport methods as pedestrian, of course, bicycle. We have train, long distance, regional. We have underground. We have tram. We have buses. We have on-demand transport. We have also VTC. And I think I mentioned the main ones for now. Taxis, of course. And also carpooling. Yes, that one I was forgetting. So carpooling, it's not blah blah car, but something like that, right? The metropolitan area has around, I would say, 2 to 3 million people living in it. So we can expect quite a bit of traffic going around. There are a few big cities and a lot of small villages around. Our task is to provide mostly an intermodal routing solution where people can, for instance, start at home and then do a segment or a section of their route by one mean of transport, then switch, and then take the bike. For instance, decide whether they want to take the bike on the train or not, and they want to resume them at the other end, their journey with their bike, or park it. We have also the ability of using such modes as e-scooters that can be rented at stations. That one I forgot, or also e-bikes. Yeah, so that's a bit the context. What we need to build is both a mobile application. We need to build a website. The mobile application differs from the website in terms of requirements because we want the mobile application to offer also turn-by-turn guidance. And both on the website or on the mobile application, we want users to be able to book tickets, book journeys, and buy tickets. On the other end of the system, which makes it a bit interesting, and then I will shut up, I promise, is that we want also to collect usage data, respecting user privacy, of course, so in aggregated form, in order to enable the metropolitan area to perform analysis on those on that data, and then optimize their offering based on it. For instance, adding more lines or removing obsolete lines where they are not used, changing the schedule and the timetable, and so on and so forth, right? Do you have any questions for me?
Probably quite a few that we can come up with. Requests, I don't have to be the only one writing. Like, I'm happy to have support on taking notes here. I'm gonna make the frames a little bit larger because I just learned that we cannot go below font size 10. So let's scale all of this up here a bit so that we know we have enough space available to capture all the notes. First of all, what is there to be added in terms of the notes that I took here? What are things that I may have forgotten? I'm not sure I caught all the transport modes that are supposed to be included, for example.
Let me see again. Unfortunately, I need to switch on the other window. Okay, so pedestrian, train, bicycle, tram, buses. I think those are the main ones. We don't need to be exhaustive for an exercise, I guess. We have a good mix. I think it's enough. There is also a private car, which is missing, of course. We still want people to be able, for instance, to park their car in a park and ride parking lot and then take a train, right? So private car is also a mode we can add.
Perfect. Good. So we have the modes, we have a couple of the main requirements for this, and then we can add to this over time. What are so one question to complement this service vision is, what are known sustainability objectives for the system?
We want to reduce the CO emissions in the metropolitan area. So reduce air pollution is one big target. One optional target, which we might be looking at in the future, is also reducing noise pollution by optimizing our offering, right? Yeah, I would say those are the main targets. Of course, we can also improve the health of our citizens by suggesting routes which can lead them to do a bit more exercise or stuff like that. If we can also do that, that's great.
Mhm. Okay, so I'm hearing the main one is reducing air pollution,
Yes.
and then secondary are improving the health of citizens and improving reducing noise pollution.
Mhm.
Okay. Great.
Would reducing congestion be another?
Do you mean traffic jams?
Yeah.
Yes, optimizing the traffic is part of the goals. For me, they go into the direction of reducing air pollution and improving health because they reduce stress on citizens, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But for sure, yes.
Yes, they're definitely connected to air and health. And also the one thing that is not covered by that is the time factor. So when we have a reduction of the traffic jams, then there is also more efficiency, which we sometimes argue whether that's a sustainability thing or not. However, it does free up time for other things in theory. Beautiful. Okay. So that's a great start. And then the next piece we get to look at are what are the known sustainability effects of the system, because if we apply a method and then at the end we're like, well, we don't know much more than before, those are the effects we already knew anyways, we're just going to make a quick list of what comes to mind right now. Like, what do you already know, Matteo, that is a known sustainability effect of the system that you're currently developing?
It depends whether we build it right.
Mhm.
I think there are a few risks related to the system as we are building it. One risk is, of course, to increase air pollution if we provide users with the wrong routes or journey solutions.
Mhm.
The other risk is that we lead to if we present the data to the what we call the hypervisor. The hypervisor is the entity inside the metropolitan area which looks at the traffic data and decides whether they want to, for instance, add another bus line or remove a train line, etc. So if the hypervisor gets the wrong data, they might take a wrong decision leading to an increase in traffic, right? Or a reduced offer for citizens. There are other issues which might be that if we configure the system incorrectly and we start offering bad routes to people, for instance, going by feet or by bike, then people will not use the system or will actually try to use other modes, and then they will use something which will pollute more than public transit or.
Yes, we know
I
that.
have a first question.
Go ahead.
How do you avoid that a brainstorming starts at this point? So how do you
thanks for that question. Hopefully by my phrasing of let's just take off the bat what you already know, like this is true, this is true, this is true, and then wrap it up after just a couple of minutes. Like that's how I usually go about it. Like it's really just about capturing this is the screenshot of right now, and then let's go into the checklist of questions. So
I can provide one more, which might be interesting. We know that we have been asked by the metropolitan area to prioritize certain providers over others due to some political choices. That might lead to some issues, right?
Yep.
We are talking about mobility providers, just to be clear.
Yeah. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, good. So with that, I would say like that wraps up the known sustainability effects. So Peter, to come back to your question, we just keep this part short. That's the only proper quote unquote answer I can give you for that, so that we say, okay, this is our snapshot for the start. And now let's look at the questions. All right, let me share. I'm just going to go ahead and share the desktop so that when I flip screens back and forth, it's going to do the very same thing. You see the workbook now? Okay, good. Just to make sure it's all captured. So after these steps, we get to go into the capture phase with brainstorming and discussion, which means we're going to go through the questions one by one. And then we're going to brainstorm a few of the effects. Now, there's two ways of how we can go about this, and keeping timing in mind, we may do it slightly different from what we have at in this workbook, because in this workbook it says wildly brainstorm, and then only later in the analysis and synthesis phase we're going to put it into a diagram. Well, to some extent we have to do it this way anyways. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes per dimension, which is not going to give us a whole lot of time, but otherwise we're going to run out of time for the entire workshop. We're going to spend about 10 minutes per dimension on brainstorming, and we'll start to cluster the effects, and then afterwards we'll put them together. So we're going to start with the social questions, and we're going to capture those on Miro as well, the outcomes for those, which means we get a couple of next frames here. And following that social dimension, there's two things we can do to make this more time efficient for the time that we have. We'll note down the effects, and then maybe in parallel, we'll start organizing them into first, second, and third order, because we have a couple of people who've worked with the methodology here a lot. So coming to the social questions, the first one is around the sense of community. So the idea is we have 5 dimensions of sustainability: social, individual, technical, environmental, and economic. And the first one for the social is sense of community. So it means the feeling of belonging to an organization, to a group of like-minded people. We have 5 key topic areas per dimension, and we cannot claim that this covers everything that could potentially be discussed in the social dimension. These topic areas have emerged out of previous discussions and previous case studies that we've had, and they seem to be a decent subset for capturing most of what is relevant. We cannot claim that this is complete and covers everything and is the greatest ever. It's as good as it gets within a given amount of time. All right, let's dive in. So this is where all the participants can become active, not only our domain representative and stakeholder Matteo. So from what we've heard by Matteo's service vision and system vision, how can the product or service potentially affect a person's sense of belonging to certain groups? So this gets us to think about what are the user groups for the system, and what sense of belonging could be developed here, and what could get in the way of that. Thoughts on that?
I can offer something maybe. I would say that there are a lot of people in small villages around the city, they have access to public transport only in the form of transport on demand. So having an easy way to call a bus for the next day and be able to reach their friends in other small villages is critical for them, because those are often elderly people or young children or students. And yeah, we are still in a pandemic, but as soon as it ends, we hope that we can see each other face to face a bit more often, right?
Good one. Yes. Anything else that comes up for sense of belonging or sense of community?
Planning bike tours could be also together with friends, could be also something interesting. Often cyclists are tight-knit groups.
So these are ways in how the system could support a feeling of community or belonging. If we think in terms of,
I have one more. I mean, it's in terms of that you community, that you feel you do something good for the city.
yes,
Reducing
exactly.
by reducing CO2 or whatever.
Very well. That was exactly the one I was going to hint at. Perfect. Is there any way how using the system could decrease the feeling of belonging or a sense of belonging, sense of community?
The pricing, if it is a pricing, if a different pricing could be that you get the division between rich and poor family country, potential.
Yes. So in most municipal areas, the idea is that public transport be available at very low rates so that nobody is going to be excluded. And if the pricing was not chosen in an appropriate way for that, that could lead to some exclusivity of the system. Yes, very well.
Also, some lines could be removed if there is not enough demand.
How would that affect the belonging, though?
Well, if I cannot move anymore around and reach other people.
Okay. Is that influenced by your system, though? So this is a good question. And it's like, how do we draw the scope of the system?
Yes.
So are you saying the city may decide to pull some bus lines because they're not used enough, and then the people who live in that village are kind of left out? Or are you saying if a line is not used sufficiently, it's going to be taken out of your system, but it's still going to exist as a public bus line?
You are right. It's out of boundary for the system.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it in some sense because the system going to do some analysis? The system going to picking the places where you actually make money and places where you don't make money.
So the system is going to provide you with the data to make a decision. How you make that decision, however, is out of the scope of the system.
Yeah. If we buy into the decision capacity of the metropolitan area transport is part of this, then we have a giant scope creep, Rogart. So I would agree with Matteo that
fine, no problem.
Okay, good. Then,
so just to clarify, if the particular service is not necessarily unprofitable, but is not being used extensively, it's removed from the service that you're providing, not physically removed.
No, we were saying that that is not the case. And that physically removing it from the service, if the city took that decision, that would not be within the scope of the analysis that we're doing today.
Okay. But that would obviously, that would be a negative impact because it would increase the isolation of rural communities.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying that if the analysis data provided by the system were to lead to a line being removed, that might have a negative effect?
Yeah.
And that without having that analysis data, that decision would probably not be taken because we wouldn't know?
That was my point too. That was my point too.
Yeah.
That was
Okay.
what I was after.
All right. All right.
The reason I say that is I live in a rural environment where most of the time the public service is transporting air. But, you know, there are peak times throughout that where, you know, kids are going to school or people are going to work. But for, you know, outside of peak commuting time, they're essentially transporting very few passengers.
I would like also to understand a bit better this point, because for me it's very interesting. Let's say I'm designing a knife, right? I can use a knife to do something good, like just cut my vegetables, or I can use it to, I don't know, murder somebody. That would be a very bad usage, right? It's my decision how I use the tool.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm designing the tool, should I take into account how it could be used also to hurt somebody or not?
I think the company want to make money. So, I mean, they basically want to make money, of course. So
when we're not asking about what they actually do, Matteo was asking, should they? and my answer is yes, as system developers, we have to give consideration to unintended uses. That doesn't mean we're responsible for somebody using it in a bad way. So for example, the person manufacturing the knife is not responsible whether one day somebody is going to use that knife to hurt somebody. And maybe it's useful to think about that it could be used in bad ways, and maybe that could have taken influence on the design. And obviously some tools more than others.
So for instance, with a knife, I could have a retractable blade. So if I try to stab somebody, it goes in or something like that.
Right? That could be a design consideration that leads to that. That comes from such an observation. Yeah, possibly. Yes, good point. A very good question. It's a really good question. So while we're not solely responsible, there's a slight bit of, yeah, there is responsibility for potential impacts. And is there a way of how we can do better? So yeah, perfect. Next question, trust. Trust means having a firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. And how could the product or service change the trust between the users and the business that owns the system or the community in which it operates?
Well, here there are some kind of easy to see benefits by using the system in terms of both being more efficient to reach my destination, reducing the carbon footprint, and so on and so forth. So if I can provide good solution and my data is trustworthy, then users are also going to increase their trust in both the metropolitan area and also in the application provider.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, if I provide a bad solution, they will lose their trust.
Yes. Solution increases trust. City, bad solution versus that.
Yeah, and there are of course also a couple of hygiene factors, how I call them, in terms of security and privacy of users. If that's not respected, then of course trust is broken. It's not something that increases trust because they're just expected to be there, right?
Yes. So we call that one well, I don't know if it's cross-cutting concern, it's cross-cutting, it's a dimension cutting effect. So some technical characteristics. It is difficult to speak and talk and think at the same time.
One very interesting thing here in the system is that it's also bikes part of the system. And I'm only thinking about we're having a system like this in Bergen, and some places you have hills, and people like to bike down the hills and not up the hills. So the bike always concentrate on some place. So if the resource is on wrong places in some sense, then the system will not work very well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who can state that. The mismatch between the resource and the system in some sense, which is you got my point, I guess.
No, I didn't understand it. At least I can't translate it in my head.
The point is that if this system having like bikes and things like in the system, and like in Bergen, for example, where I come from, there's a lot of hills. So people like to cycling down the hill. So all the bikes get concentrated into area. There's no bike on the top of the hill, and all the bike is bottom of the hill, because people only cycling one direction, not in both directions. Kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. So when resources are insufficiently available because all the e-bikes always go downhill, then that can decrease the trust in the system. Yeah.
Yes, because then you have to wait, kind of thing, and you never had a bike where you want it.
I think that's a great observation. I'm just wondering whether it is in scope for us, since I would expect the mobility service provider to have some kind of mean to balance out availability across stations.
They should have. They should think about it. So I don't know. I mean, so that is a problem. If you don't think about it, it will be a problem.
So the way I would phrase it here is it's not a concern in terms of you have responsibility for that. We can observe, however, that an accurate resource availability, for example, if we know whether e-bikes are actually available at that particular drop-off point or pickup point, that could increase the trust in the system.
Perfect. Yeah.
So that's already an action of how we could increase the trust in the system. Very nice. And then the next one, inclusiveness and diversity. We have already touched upon a little bit with that sense of community piece. And what can you add for inclusiveness and diversity? Go ahead.
We for sure need to provide accessibility data. That's not just an option that's by law. What we can do is also improving on that. For instance, not just providing whether specific locations is wheelchair accessible, but also providing the size by which the wheelchair can enter lifts, for instance, or whether providing information about tactile signs on the floor or on walls for vision impaired people. So, yep.
Okay.
And of course, these are, if we're talking, for instance, vision impaired people, often they cannot drive, meaning that for them, having a good accessible application for public transport is essential to be able to be an integral part of the society and move around.
Yes, perfect. Good.
So one thing I can probably propose is actually the usage of multiple language, just because people have different background. So just give them, we use their native language, just in case some people doesn't, particularly limited certain language they are using.
Yes, good. Okay. And then we have equity. So is there a way how the system could make people be treated differently from each other in terms of decision support? Or is everybody treated same? Can we think of a case where that could be undermined, the equity?
One we mentioned before, which is prioritizing certain providers over others. That can have also a financial impact.
Yes. Very good one. And then last but not least, in the social one, participation and communication. Could this product change the way how people create networks, how they participate in some kind of group work, how they support each other or criticize? Are there communication channels that the system provides? To allow for feedback?
It's a bit outside of the scope, I guess, but the hypervisor is supposed to also create a unique, unified point for feedback and complaints.
Okay. How do you spell that hypervisor? Is it hyper?
H-Y-P-E-R visor,
Like this?
V-I-S-O-R, yes.
Okay.
What about gamification?
I'm sorry?
What about gamification?
Ah, yeah, good idea.
I think it's a communication. So gamification, Rogart, is an idea that you're adding, and I believe, Matteo, you said the hypervisor currently provides what? A point of communication?
The hypervisor provides a central point for both feedback and complaints. Instead of having to go to each single mobility service provider in turn, they act as a hub for any kind of issue. Okay,
so hypervisor is the name of the entire system.
No, the hypervisor is an external entity, which is the one that decides also on the data we were talking about, whether to add lines or remove lines. They are basically the monitoring entity for the functioning of the system.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying. Good. Beautiful. So with that,
I think gamification was mentioned. I think that was a very good point. I don't know who mentioned that, but
it was me.
Rogart.
Because that will change quite a lot if you put that thing in, kind of, you know. And then if I temporarily get point if you use in a call as, for example. But that's kind of using to shame people if you're kind of having like teams or something or play against other country, you know, so it can have both a positive effect and a negative effect.
Yeah, also maybe with the app you can link to the, how is it called, health app, you know, that you did a certain number of steps or meters. Yeah.
And I get a higher salary for that month.
Here in Germany, you get a discount on your health insurance.
It makes sense. It makes sense, though.
Yep. Perfect. With that, congratulations. An hour into the workshop, we've finished the intro and the first dimension. So because this is a workshop about sustainability, we're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to hold you exactly to the timing. Take a mental and physical health break. find the washing room or something to hydrate. Take a few deep breaths, get up for a moment. And then for the piece after, I'm wondering whether it would make sense to maybe split into subgroups. On the other hand, the group is reasonably small, so maybe it's good to keep brainstorming in the larger group through the questions. Votes on that? Colin, what's your thought? You've moderated.
I think
most
we're a small enough group, I think, just to sort of blast through it. And you know, it's a tutorial that's showing how we can apply this to a particular system. So it doesn't need to be an in-depth analysis of stuff. And I think we're getting some good stuff out of it.
I also want to say that I have to go to formal dinner in half an hour.
Yep.
So
okay.
So maybe less people even.
Perfect. Good. Then I will pause the recording for now. Remind me to switch it on again. And we are back. Maybe. So let's move on to the next dimension, which, if I remember correctly, is the individual one.
Hello.
So let's take a look. For the individual dimension, we first talk about health. The health means the state of a person's mental or physical condition, and how, what we say, can this system improve or decrease a person's physical, mental, emotional health. That's on that. It's obviously good to take a bicycle and not so good to ride in an individual car all the time. What else comes to mind? I mean, we can write down these obvious ones as well, of course.
We were also talking about air and noise pollution. So a decrease in air and noise pollution if you're doing this right.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is this individual dilemma?
Sorry?
I missed what is this thing? It is individual dilemma. What is the if we talk about
dimension, the individual dimension.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. So potentially increased by exercise, potentially decreased because of noise pollution and or air pollution.
And a big thing I think that for many people, what is the difficult thing is the waste of time, because it's always quicker in some sense to take a car in most cases if you would make a good system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the idea here is to still offer the car option if it is faster. So there are a few different dimensions we can optimize your route. We can do it by fuel consumption, for instance, in terms of price, or we can do it in terms of CO2 impact, or we can do it in terms of time. And it's not the system alone to be the one that needs to help out here. I guess, of course, you will need some park and ride parking lots from the metropolitan area in order to park your car and then change. But the hope is that you can choose to take something which is more efficient than what you already will have by car. So one of the goals is in time to improve not just the system, but also the metropolitan area through appropriate decision making, so that it really becomes more convenient to take a public transport.
I'm thinking in a bigger way in some sense, and I think about the sense that is what people believe in some sense. It could be that that you never try the system because you believe that it will take a longer time. So I don't know really what to do about it, but it's a big issue. I know
this is a very good observation. We might want to design the system so that it prominently compares the two solutions.
I think so, because it's really a lot of people think like that.
Yep. I think that's a very good point. Thank you for that. A compare mode. Good. Next one. Lifelong learning, which kind of plays into what we're just commenting on. So is there a use of learning opportunities? Can the service increase people's competencies in some way or decrease?
I mean, you're learning traveling pattern. You learn it, and also you can also learn traveling pattern depending on the weather. If for example, in a rainy day, for example, if there are less or more people using, for example.
I don't know if it qualifies, but you would also get information about how much CO2 you're using, and that leads to a more environmental sustainability friendly outlook.
Yes. That's great. So we could learn that, guess what? On rainy days, nobody likes to take the bus, therefore, more capacity there. I can optimize according to my health. I could optimize according to CO2 emissions. So the feedback from the data that the system has might help lifelong learning. Good. Any way how it could decrease?
Well, you don't you unlearn how to use a paper map, but I don't think I cannot find my road anymore without a navigation system nowadays.
I do have one. Is that you're using like you may be using engine when you can have walked. For example, in a system you have like bike that using engine, and maybe have some kind of you're using two wheel, and so I mean you become more lazy. You walk less basically.
Yep. Or
yes,
as a friend of mine noticed in Boston, when you're late for the subway, the system could tell you you might still be on time if you take an Uber.
Exactly.
Instead of waiting for the next subway.
So I realized in Bergen that people start using this electrical thing a lot more than actually walking. But I don't know if I reduce the number of cars in the street.
Yes. Good. Next one, privacy. Privacy means being free from intrusion or disturbance in one's private life. How can this product or service expose potentially or help to hide a person's identity, whereabouts, or relations?
So this is a very delicate one. And we are fighting with this every day. One thing that the hypervisor wants is to collect also patterns of usage from citizens so that they can optimize. That means that we will send the geolocation to some kind of cloud server or somewhere, backend service. It doesn't need to be the exact geolocation. We can, of course, handle that. We have some way to pseudo-anonymize data, fortunately, but this is a risk for sure.
Yes. Okay. Safety. Being protected from danger, risk, or injury. Is there a way how the service could either expose people to danger or have them be or feel less exposed to danger?
Yes.
Oh.
As if I tell you to take the bike on the highway, that's a problem. Now I am exaggerating a bit, but I can assure you I tried our system against system from the competitors, and some of those, I will not say which ones, will tell you to take a very traffic road instead of going through with your bike, instead of going through side roads or streets.
Mm.
And that is dangerous, of course.
Yes, very good point. And I've seen that improve in some of systems over time, where the navigation system would tell me for the bike back a few years ago, you go the same ways that you would go take by car. And now some of the recommendations have improved. So yes, good catch. Beautiful.
If you also walk with your phone in your hand because you're following turn by turn, you're going to have an accident. So this is one of the reasons why we are very careful when we do the UX design of turn by turn guidance.
I only want to put up one point down. I mean, I don't know what they call it in English, but you have this thing that you have 1 feet on the thing, and then you use the other feet to move forward. What's that called?
Step, you mean?
You have a wheel and with 2 wheels, and then you have something you're holding on to, and now you're using that one legs. And I don't know with that part of the system, but after that introduced in Norway, a lot more people get accident, and even some people have died in accident.
You mean the e-scooter?
Not e-scooter. It's the one that you're using the force of the scooter. Scooter. Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah, you're standing on it, and then you have engine on it, kind of thing, you know? And then you moving with it, but people falling over, and particularly people when they're drunk in the nighttime.
Yes. Correct. Yeah.
It's been a lot of issues.
Does it make sense to include provide bike lanes? Or...
Information about bike lanes, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, we do use that when computing a route. Yes, it makes absolute sense.
Good. Last one in the individual dimension is agency. So the capacity of an individual to act or make decisions of their free will. Is there a way how the system empowers a person or prevents them from taking action when necessary?
First of all, I would say providing multiple alternatives for routes is first and foremost important. And then having a good summary, of course, showing, for instance, a comparison of the CO2 impact, the cost, and so on and so forth.
Yes, beautiful. So that's the individual dimension. More to come. Next is the environmental. First topic here, materials and resources. So this includes everything that's needed to produce and deploy and run the product or service. How would you say a material is consumed to produce this product or service and then to operate it? We are talking about an app. So yes, there are a couple of technical background thingies like the servers and the cluster that you run calculations on. And we know that those are usually less impactful than the change that it could have on the user behavior in their environment when using the system. So maybe let's focus on that second aspect. The first one, the first order impacts, they can definitely go into the analysis. The second order impacts is where it becomes really interesting, because when we scale up the system, that's going to scale up even more. And it will come back to a couple of the points we have already touched upon in terms of CO2 emissions and also the hardware used. Like, we know from studies that the lifetime of e-scooters is direly short, unfortunately, because people don't treat them well.
Yeah, true. What the product can do, of course, is to also provide guidance when unlocking an e-scooter on how to use it. Or you could ask people to take a photograph after parking the e-scooter and locking it.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can have as a benefit that you are insured that you didn't damage it, and the next one will find it not up a tree, which tends to be the new trend in Berlin.
Could find it not what? I didn't catch the word.
Up a tree.
Mm.
There are some funny practical pranksters that tend to put e-scooters over fences and trees here in Berlin.
Yes. Oh, up a tree. Now I got it. Yes. Yeah. Yes. They end up in all sorts of unfortunate places.
In Manchester, it's usually in the canal.
Oh.
Yeah, I brought up the example of e-scooters. It's obviously not limited to e-scooters. So what else could be going on here?
Hopefully, we will see a decrease in car usage, of course, which will mean that car will last longer, and they will require less maintenance, less fuel.
Yes.
But how do we know that we're reducing material if everybody keep their cars and we're only producing more things, basically? Then it will having a negative impact on the environment. I mean, the fact is, in Norway it's normal to have 2 cars, and what we gain for is that if everybody give away the second car or get reduced the second car, that will have a huge impact. If that not happen, it will having a very small impact in that sense, though.
But
less.
Okay, but I think the ramification of that, if you take that into account, will be very hard to predict. Because if that car is put on the used market, it will mean that somebody will not buy a new car, but could buy a used one. So if the car is still serviceable, that could actually be a good thing. It's just a bit hard for me to predict that.
Yes, I mean that you can very kind of find out, but if everybody keep the 2 cars, then you're not having winning so much if everybody kind of get rid of 1 car. That's my point.
But you will still use 2 cars, and at some point they would end their life, and you will still get rid of them, right? So somebody will need to get rid of them no matter what. This is what I'm pointing at. You just don't get rid of it yourself. Maybe you put it on the used market, and somebody else used it, so it still reduces the overall number of cars in circulation, right?
But assuming that the new people not buying a car, I mean that I mean assuming the maximum assumption input now might not be right. We don't know.
Yeah,
It could be that everybody buying 2 cars in the future too.
Potential, yes. Okay. Let's take the
Just one
next
point,
question.
because this last point, that is really the win-win. If people really get rid of second car, that is a big win for society, basically.
You're talking about second car per person? You're talking households.
Yes.
Just clarifying a perspective here.
Maybe we're talking about a family of multiple people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it is, a household.
Yes, there is a potential. There is households with less people and less cars to start with. Not every household has 2 cars. And I have quite a few friends in Gothenburg who actually do not have a single vehicle per household, which is easier in urban areas, absolutely. Not easy in rural areas. Okay, let's move on to waste and pollution.
Because it depends on the public transport, which is very efficient. Yeah, so
yes,
I suppose.
So waste and pollution, we have talked a bit about emissions already. Is there anything we can add on here? Because the obvious one is that for this system, it has the potential to significantly decrease pollution, because that is already the main objective, or one of the main objectives for the system to be in place.
I suppose if you've got data centers and algorithms, number crunching things, then you're going to have effects from that.
I wish I could tell that we can use green certified data centers, but unfortunately we are still far away from that.
Well, let's put it on there as an optimization potential in the future. Use green data centers. Okay. Biodiversity. So is there a way how the system could affect the biodiversity in its operational environment or in other affected land, plants or animals around it?
If we can reduce the number of cars, and as such CO2 and noise pollution is also a big one, and indirectly also light pollution, then we can also have some animals returning in areas where they have been pushed out from.
Yeah, light pollution is a big thing here.
Yes, good point. Right on. And then energy. How could the service affect the need for production of energy or use of energy?
Can potentially require more electric energy. If people are pushed towards e-scooters and so on and so forth over normal bikes, human-powered bikes, I still think at the end, going away from fossil fuels is going to offset the kind of risk.
Mhm.
But
Yes. Yes, I agree. And that is something that your system does not have an influence on. So we can still say that general move towards clean energy can mitigate effects of that.
the system can still try to highlight certain alternatives, kind of promote the usage of certain alternatives over others.
Mhm.
The user can still decide not to use them, but at least there can be that kind of teaching the user that
Mhm.
taking a normal bike is better.
Mm. Leaving the scooters anywhere, like in some places, that's how it happens. Is it an environmental thing or more social?
I put it under materials and resources.
Okay.
It's a good point, though. It could be, I mean, it's quite antisocial behavior, isn't it, to put it up a tree?
Mhm.
Because it's very annoying to have my scooters spread all over.
Yeah.
Yep. Noted. Thank you.
Matthew, how sensitive is the system if it there's a stronger dependency on things like vehicles to sort of global price rises in energy, which is, a big thing at the moment?
At the end, the prices are made by the mobility service providers. We do not have a direct influence on those. So, for instance, you will have a certain company operating the train service setting price for tickets.
Mhm.
I agree it's a concern, but we don't have really a way to influence those.
Mhm. Okay. Last topic for environmental logistics. The effects of product or services moving people. I mean, this system is used mainly for personal transport. Is there any way how it could also affect logistics in one way or another?
It is possible
Mhm.
to integrate it with a last mile offering if we wanted to. And we could also offer track routing if needed. Track routing would be just, of course, an alternative to car routing. So it wouldn't use the other modes, just to be clear. But it's something which is doable.
Yep.
And last mile delivery can be done also on board of a bike, for instance, right? Like people bringing you your pizza.
Yes. Yeah. Except
However,
now they do that on e-scooters as well.
Exactly. However, I will just want, normally this is not the same application because they have different requirements. So this is kind of a scope creep for me.
Yes.
Typically, you want a different application for that.
Yep. So I'll just denote scope creep here. Perfect. Nice. With that, congratulations. We are through 3 dimensions. So let's move on to the economic dimension. Value means the worth or usefulness of something. How can this product or service create or destroy monetary value? Is there a way of how it could do that?
Well, it makes money to us. It makes money to all of the mobility service providers, especially because it has a chance to increase the usage of the public transit offering, make them more known. Right now, they are all spread out into a diaspora of small services. A unified interface would promote usage across the region. So that's a strong economical factor, I will say. Also, we didn't talk about it, but there are also other providers to take into account, such as parking lots operators.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there are also the fidelity cards, which are integrated into the application, which can have an additional impact. Yeah.
Okay.
Programs, we can call them
Yep.
fidelity programs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Customer relationship management, is there a way how this service influences customer relationship management between the business and its consumers? I guess in this case, the city and its citizens. How could this relationship be affected, if at all? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it is related to the trust that is built between citizens and city. It covers a bit the same aspects for me.
Yes.
Either it's good and people will see its value and they will use it and they will be happy with it, and they will see that then it will increase trust and also relationships with their city, or it will go in the opposite direction.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
then at the next elections, somebody will lose their place.
Right? Yes. Cool. Next one, supply chain. So is there a way of how the product affects the supply chain of the business?
Well, customers vote with their wallets, right? If they use the system, if they can, so increased usage in the system means more lines, means an increased service in that area.
Yes. Yeah.
Even building of new infrastructure.
Correct. And then governance. So yes, we've touched a little bit upon this, and we always noticed when, like, by the time we come to the fourth dimension, stuff starts repeating itself, and that is okay. It just means we can move through it a little more smoothly, and we still check it to make sure that we are not forgetting anything. So governance, process of interaction and decision-making amongst the actors involved in the system through laws, norms, and power of language. Is there a way how the service can influence how decisions are made? And it seems that there is a lot that can be done by the hypervisor.
Exactly. I think they chose the word hypervisor because the supervisor already existed. So they wanted something on top of the supervisor.
Yes. It is an interesting choice of term, because to me, hypervisor sounds a bit sci-fi and a bit hyper, haha. So it has a very interesting
But
connotation.
governance is not more related to social, not.
You can see it in terms of both, because there are then implications on the financial situation potentially, depending on how governance is done. So you're correct, absolutely. So from the way how decisions get influenced by the system, how can those changes then again impact the financial situation?
Yeah.
So
Here
that
we're
could
talking,
be,
of course, on online services. It can be also roads, streets. It can be more generic, right? So it's not just public transit. That's what I'm saying.
Precisely. Good. And then number 5, innovation. So in which way could the service affect further investment in research and development?
I can see a lot of hooks for research. The question is whether there is a willingness to engage there. Because there is the smart city concept by itself is still an open area of research. Route optimization is still not a solved problem. It's still tendentially NP complete. So yeah.
Yes, I think that's a really good point, the smart city concept, and having showcases for where smart city concepts have been applied in detail. That is a really good one. Okay. Sweet.
I think the other thought I have is also a good research topic for the carbon neutral, because I mean the intention of like reduce that carbon emission footprint. I think that's also a hot topic.
Of course, one could also do a social studies research, right? We don't need to be only on the technical side. There's also a lot of psychological aspects into this kind of systems.
Yes, good points. And then that in turn could incentivize new services and products. Good, very nice. And that brings us to dimension number 5, which is the technical one. We can look at, well, in theory, for SusAF in general, we have 2 perspectives here. So one is before a system gets put into place. So while it's under development or while it's being conceptualized, which is the case that we have today, as far as I've understood it, Matteo. And the second one would be when we're talking about service evolution, when there is already the product in place and we're thinking about a next iteration. And either one of them works.
This is a tender which has been closed a few weeks ago. So the system will be built in the coming year, most likely, if it is awarded.
Beautiful. Okay. So first aspect here, maintainability, the degree to which an application is understood, repaired, or enhanced. How, how are the operating system and runtime environment expected to change? Like, what is the degree of change that you already anticipate right now as you're still in the tender phase?
We have an horizon of 8 years where we know this, there will be a continued maintenance, but we do not expect a radical change into technical requirements. And then who knows, right? in our field, 8 years is an eternity. So,
Right.
but hey, I prefer this to designing system for Rolls-Royce. Those are 50 years.
Yes. Next one, we're getting to the classics. Usability. So, oh no, sorry, I skipped one. Maintainability. How can the correctness of the system be affected by other systems? So is there a way how other systems can screw with yours?
Yes, many.
Yes.
First of all, we have the data feeds incoming from the mobility service providers, which contain data such as the theoretical time schedules, the real-time schedules, incidents, um, price lists, POIs for stations, right?
Mhm.
All this data needs to be ingested continuously.
Mhm. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that's the main one. Of course, we are also using some SDKs for building the mobile applications and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Often those are open source products,
Mhm.
meaning that, or even if Google is back in Android, right, you still need to have something to do with those providers.
Mhm. Good. Yeah. Next one, usability. So what kind of knowledge do people need to have to be able to deal with your system?
What about, no, just remember that I think it has to do with the environmentals, the batteries.
Or you mean the technical maintainability of the system depending on the weight, the battery of which devices?
For the scooters, for example.
Well, the scooters are one mode of transport, so I wouldn't, they're not really a factor for the maintainability of the system. I would say that they come in for the life cycle analysis of what is being used. For the maintainability, not so sure. Colin, well, sorry, Matteo, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying for me they're really out of scope because
Mhm.
another company is both accountable and responsible for those, and that company can even fail independently, right? And the system will keep running. So if tomorrow e-scooters are banned in all Europe, the system will still stay. You will just remove one mode of operation.
Okay.
So any usability effects? Are you using standard good
And
UI?
this is an incredibly good question, by the way. Yes, there are visually impaired people, so it needs to have accessibility features. And motor impaired people.
In the in elderly?
Yes. It needs to work at a higher resolution, right? Oh, sorry, lower resolution. Or high resolution, but bigger font size.
Yep. Good. Adaptability. So are there ways in which the system needs to adapt to changes in its environment? Are there any ways how the system could be used in a different context? So we've spoken about the data feeds that you have coming in, but beyond that, is there a way how we could switch the usage context?
We were talking about some scope creep before. Last mile could potentially be something interesting in the future.
How do you mean by scope creep?
Scope creep because it's not part of the current statement, right? Because we do not have the requirement to provide any kind of delivery platform. So it will be just a waste of money to build it right now.
Yes. So we had mentioned a scope creep under logistics in the environmental dimension, where we said, oh, last mile delivery, and currently not. So yeah, here we can pick that up again and say that's a thing, or it might be in the future.
And then there are two other things that come to mind. One is self-driving cars or vehicles as a type of on-demand transport. And the other one would be drones.
That's me hanging on the bottom of a drone, right? Going over the traffic jam.
No, for delivery in the case.
Okay.
Because they need to follow walkability rules, typically drones, as they are built now, at least. We're not talking about the flying ones. We're talking about the terrain ones. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sorry, my mind went a bit sci-fi.
That was
awesome. Security, freedom from, resilience against potential harm caused by external or internal attacks. So are there, which assets controlled by your system would be desirable to an attacker?
Well, the credit card data, if they have to buy tickets. And then the personal geolocation data for the movement patterns.
Yes.
There are more, but those are the main two.
Yeah. And then last but not least, scalability. The ability to handle growing amounts of work in a graceful way. How well does that work? Or what's the current thought on it?
That is something we try to solve a bit later in the design of the system. In the elicitation and analysis phase, we try only to understand how it could grow rather than how we solve the issue. So we know how many potential users there are in the region, and we know it could grow, I have no idea, maybe 15 to 20% in the next 10 years. So we start maybe from a user base of 200 to 300,000 and grow up to, let's say, a couple of million users. But we try hard not to already provide a solution at this stage.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Yeah, just to clarify, so the estimated growth is 15% of the citizens of the region. The number of users will grow steadily over the first years of usage up to 2 million, and then it will plateau most likely. And then we expect the 15% increase. Just not to be misleading.
Yeah. I was trying to make sense in my head how 15% added on top of 300,000 gets us to 2 million. Thanks for clarifying. Steady increase in users.
Okay.
Okay, that is really helpful. Cool. And with that, we have spoken briefly about all the topics, the key topics. So like Colin mentioned earlier, this is a tutorial, so it's not about can we get everything that potentially needs to be talked about for the system. The idea is more, can we exemplarily do this in a way that is going to help somebody apply this method again in the future? And we are at 56 to the hour. So Let's take a second short break here. Let that sink in for a moment. And then we'll reconvene in 5. Matteo, if you can do that magic with the counter once more, that would be
You
much
can do it
appreciated.
yourself if you want. There is the clock icon at the bottom, at the very bottom.
The bottom of my screen is hard to find sometimes.
Yes.
There we go.
That's it.
We'll do it without music. I'll see you in 5. And thank you so much for the input. Pause the recording. Right on. Everybody back from break. And on the right-hand side, you see the most beautiful sketch of a SusAF diagram. Nope, it's not beautiful, I know. This just says you can use any whiteboard that happens to be in your environment to start working on this. And it's a very basic radar chart. Now, the only other shape I need to find is a straight line. Somebody find me a straight line, please. Oh, basic shapes. Nope. All right. We'll fix some kind of straight line here by pretending this is one. There we go. Straight line in the making. And that way we can differentiate the impacts of the 5 dimensions. And I'm gonna deal with the details of this representation later, because for now we want to focus on where do the effects from all those dimensions go. And we want to have some discussion here, because we could easily spend the last 55 minutes of this tutorial trying to sort the effects into the places. So for me, it's also important to get your questions answered in terms of what might be unclear, or in which way do you think you might want to use this method differently than how we have used it so far, and what other questions do you have? So let's open it up for a moment to check in with what's going on your end.
Okay, before I leave, as I said, I'm leaving. I would suggest maybe eventually some kind of catalog, or but that depends on the domains. Can be a bit complicated, but it can be built now according to the domains. As soon as you are filling these requirements for each dimension for a certain domain, maybe you can kind of retrofitting the environment with some reusable requirements.
These are not requirements, these are impacts.
Impacts, oh sorry, impacts, yeah.
I know we're still at a requirements engineering conference, and yet most of the stuff we talk about here are potential impacts. But then we can deduce, we can then, however, deduce requirements from it. So both of that is feasible. So we can create a catalog of impacts, and we can then also derive the generic requirements from that. So that makes the catalog then also more useful in the future.
Yeah. It's my suggestion.
Yes, we've had people working on that, and we have catalogs available for a few of the systems that we've done case studies on. I have a few students who did their thesis on these projects.
We also have a sustainability catalog, but so maybe we can do some integration there.
The one you presented last year at RE for Susie?
There's an improvement on that. So the results of a master student that's going to be presented in the ER conference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I have one question.
Yes.
So most of the framework is really aimed at sustainability. However, the technical questions for me are a bit orthogonal to the rest, in the sense that I would expect those to be answered either way, even outside of the framework for any system you build. I'm not sold yet about the usefulness of having them as part of this
Mhm.
framework. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yes, absolutely. So the reason why they are here is because when we started with the 4 other dimensions, people would always come back to the question of, wait a second, we're still talking software systems, right? Because you're way high level above that. And so I agree with you that the other 4 dimensions are on a higher abstraction level, and the technical questions are closer to the implementation part. And while one could attempt to ignore questions about the individual sustainability of a technical system they're developing, you would not get away without ever talking about the security of a system. What we found is that most of the higher level sustainability requirements for systems can only be implemented if translated into constraints that then address some of the technical sustainability.
Okay, then follow-up question. There are many other non-functional requirement areas which are not covered by the technical questions. Like about performance, for instance. Will it be better to extend the technical questions than to be more comprehensive? Or I'm just trying to make it fit, right?
Yeah.
Because either it's a bit more comprehensive for me, because the rest of the questions in the other areas are quite comprehensive. I have the feeling they cover everything that there is to cover, at least at a very high level.
I challenge that statement, and I challenge it because you're a domain expert in the technical dimension. So for somebody coming from a social background, they may have the assumption, you know what, it seems that this covers the social dimension pretty well. That this covers the technical dimension pretty well. And you as a subject matter in the technical dimension, you're asking me, wait, there's a ton more things we could be talking about here. So it's more a matter of where do you have the most in-depth knowledge? And we know that all of these dimensions are by design incomplete. It's not comprehensive. We are covering it reasonably well for being able to do this in a 2 to 3 hour workshop. We're not covering it comprehensively, and that is true for the technical dimension. As you pointed out, there are plenty of other quality characteristics, as well as for the other dimensions. So one could go ahead and say, if we want to take this framework into a more comprehensive version, we can take the standards that are available for each of those dimensions and plug those in. For example, you could plug in the ISO qualities of software quality standards in the technical dimension. That will give us a more comprehensive view. For the social, we can plug in the ISO 26000 for corporate social responsibility. For the economic, I don't know the standard number, but there are some, and that way we could certainly make the question coverage more comprehensive. And the reason why we have limited to 5 topics per dimension is that otherwise it's really hard to time bound this thing without requiring multiple day sessions.
All right.
And thank you for the question. Okay, what other questions are there? With 2 more participants in here. Quingli, Ali, I'm just gonna shorten your name. Julie, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. What are the questions that you may have? I know you joined a little bit later. It's still okay to just ask a general question to get into the scope of things here.
Actually, this is Chenli here, by the way. I don't actually have any particular question at this moment. I think the thing we have been talking about is very straightforward. I think it definitely just for me, like kind of get a new perspective that's helpful. If I have some question later, I'll definitely ask.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, and we'll carry on from here. So the next step would be to go through each of the dimensions and then take the effects and put them into the diagrams as they are here, as the empty template is here. So we're going to sort them into the dimensions, and those are already labeled by the boxes we did the brainstorming accordingly to. But we need to differentiate which of those are first order effects, which are second, and which are third order effects. And then in the second step, we figure out what are the connections in between them. And during our brainstorming phase, there were already a couple of times when we denoted cross relations. So for example, in the economic dimension, relationship between citizen and citizens could improve or decrease. See trust and social dimension. So in the economic dimension for CRM, the relationship could improve or decrease is an indirect effect because it is dependent on how we use that system, how that relationship changes. Man, here we really get to the scrollability of the system that we're using. So this had a cross relation to trust in social. We said a good solution could increase the trust in the city. And that is also an indirect effect. Okay, and now I'm at a loss with the connections. Oh, that's directly done here. Okay. I thought, yes, perfect. Good, so there's a cross relation in between the two. And then there is a conversation that could follow to say, wait, which direction is this relationship going? And unfortunately, there is no bidirectional arrow, so I'm going to take the arrow out of it for now and say there is a relation in between those two, and it needs to be talked about in which direction this relationship makes more sense. So this is how we would start filling that diagram. Like we go through all the dimensions and we put the effects in there.
What will be the semantics of the arrow again in terms of the relationship?
The relationship is an effects relationship. So yeah, just effects, and then you can make it more specific. So in our basic version, we have only one type of simple relationship, and that is has an effect or effects. And then if someone wishes to detail that notation more, there is the opportunity to say, you know what, we're going to use different types of lines, and then there can be different types of relationships. For some of the works that we have done in this area, we've simply annotated all the arrows and the relations to say this is specifically what this relationship means, to capture a bit more semantics in here. So that makes the semantics richer, and it makes the diagram even more crowded. That is one of the challenges anyways. So this overview diagram captures really the most important effects. We could at some point say, you know what, we're not going to put all the effects in here. We're going to skip some of those because, for example, the biodiversity one is a wonderful side effect that we would appreciate if that happens in the future. And we know that that would take a few years to come into play at all. It could be a systemic effect that's further down the road. On the other hand, you will also find that systemic effects are sometimes a little bit more sparse because it's harder to extrapolate that far into the future.
Yeah, and that's always the issue with the pentagram or the pentagon, because you have
Mhm.
more area towards the edges and less area in the middle.
That too, yes. So to just put a couple more examples in here, let's put it in this third dimension. And maybe let's even keep the biodiversity topic in here, which will be good for all of them. So this was the CRM. This was trust. Okay, now we've kept the semantics in our transitions. Good. Outside of the transition, or in addition to that, once we have transferred all the effects and we've spoken about how these effects relate to each other, what we finally do with the conclusion is, and this is where you'd spend a couple of hours transitioning the effects and making sure that they are in the right box. The last piece of it would be to recommend to do a summary of the threats and opportunities, and then derive some actions for both of them. So the threats would be the risks that are inherent, so some of the potential negative effects that could be happening. For example, we have a bad implementation, and that decreases the trust of people in the city. We could say that is one of the threats, and what could be an action to mitigate that. And then one of the opportunities is to say, this could potentially increase biodiversity in the future again. So what is one of the actions, how we could further support this? So that's the last piece.
One
Go ahead.
question.
Yeah.
Could you give me an example, or give us an example of a direct effect? Because I see also in the diagram, which is in the PDF, I think that the names are also slightly different. They're not direct, indirect, and systemic.
Bad me. Immediate, enabling, and systemic, you're right. So direct or immediate effects. And I should be consistent here. So immediate, enabling, and systemic comes from Lawrence Hilty's work, where we have taken those three orders of effect from, and then we often use direct and indirect as ways to explain what that means. So immediate effects are what happens by the system being in place. For example, I run a mobile app on my phone that uses energy of my phone, that uses battery power on my phone. I run this app on my phone, it consumes some memory. And for digital services, this is very limited what it really uses in terms of direct resources. The enabling means, what does the service enable me to do in my operational environment? So what does it enable the user to do by using the app? I get to choose a variety of transportation modes. I get to pick from a number of mobility service providers, and I can choose which route is going to be the best for me. I can choose to optimize by cost or by emissions or by healthy steps I'm going to take. Those are enabling effects. And then on the systemic level, that means, what happens if a lot of people use this over a long period of time? How is this going to affect the system at large? And that will mean, if a lot of people choose the health option for an extended period of time and really decrease their CO2 emissions, that could help us reach a decrease of noise and air pollution which in turn could lead to an increase in biodiversity.
So you could also see features as when you are allowing a user to perform an action or get a service which was impossible before, it will be immediate. When you are making their quality of life better, but they can have a different way to perform the same, it's an enabling factor. And systemic is kind of an environmental effect, or how do you see
I'm
it?
not sure about the differentiation in between the first two.
So let's say that I can take an e-scooter only via the app.
Okay.
That's something that I couldn't be able to do without.
Okay.
In that case, that's an immediate.
Taking a scooter is enabled by the app. So it's independent of whether this is the only way how you could take a scooter.
Okay.
So that is an enabling effect either way. But the mere fact of running software on a hardware device, of running this application, like that's going to be the direct effects. The battery usage, the server that's running in the background, those are the direct effects. The life cycle effects. Yes, they're the life cycle effects of the system.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So let me just put that in here as well. Energy use of servers, or let's say of data center. That will be an immediate effect.
But just for me, if you had to give me an example of an immediate effect, an immediate social effect, what would it be? Not necessarily.
I'm not sure they exist. Because most of that is limited by access to. That is a really good question. Congratulations, I've been presenting this for 5 years and nobody has ever asked me for a direct effect in the social dimension. Let me pause the recording here for a moment so I can look for an answer in between. Okay, looking at a different example that we've had here in the past with direct social impacts, one could argue that enable communication and the sharing of information in general might be a direct social impact. Now, one could, on the other hand, argue that, wait, that is still enabled as a user using that system, and an effect of that is that they are able to communicate or share some certain types of information. So yes, in that sense, maybe the definition of limiting it to life cycle is not 100% clean, and we can say it's the basic capacity of the features of the system. So the features of the system are to share information. A life cycle effect is to use energy. So we have explained them with the actual features of the system in the past as well. And that would then include information sharing or communication without yet the effect of what that might do for the user, or
maybe we could also look at this system in a different way and say that it has a direct impact on the health of whoever is using a bike, for instance, or whoever is walking, right? And in that sense, it has a direct impact on the physical and mental health of the user of the system. And that is enabled by the application, but it's a direct effect because I'm getting better physically or mentally by the virtue of having, for instance, guidance on a path in the forest.
Now we're getting somewhere, because that depends on how you use the application. So information sharing is there no matter what, and then whether it actually helps to increase or decrease your physical health, that depends on how you use the application. So that would be and it enables you to increase your health by using the application if that's how you use it. So therefore, I would put it in the enabling category, whereas the information availability, that would be the direct effect.
But if I add, for instance, a treadmill as a system?
Yes, precisely. Then it's a direct effect. Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thanks.
Now we've got the differentiation. Perfect. Thank you so much for the question. That really helps. Okay, and we can add that one as an individual. Potential increase of health. Good. Okay. So I think we're going to leave it at this little bit for the examples of how to classify. And you can already see from the conversation that Matteo and I are having about the differentiation that it triggers a lot more conversation and discussion and potential further insights. It also means this framework is a tool. It's nothing that is by default perfect, and it depends on how you decide to put it to use. And I hope the answering machine is going to get that one soon. There we go. So let's spend a few minutes on that last piece, because again, it's not about detailing perfectly all the elements of the system, but just to give you a general idea of how this can be used. We would list the threats and come up with some mitigation actions. And then there are some opportunities that can be identified. And we can have some supporting actions. Actually spent a few too many hours in front of the screen today. My orthography is going out the window. Good. So identified threats that we had, just to put another example back on here, is bad recommendation decreases trust in city. That was one of the threats we identified. And then we could say a mitigation of that one. Matteo, what would you say? How are you currently mitigating that, or what are you planning?
From a technical perspective, we have a few mitigations. One is strict QA testing, of course. And then we also do A/B testing. Just to name two, there are more, of course, but.
Sorry, now I blanked out. I wrote down A/B testing, and what was the one you named first?
With QA in general, but.
Q&A, yeah. Yes.
There are a few more things we can do, but I think it's enough for now.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. And then one of the opportunities, now we saw, what's your favorite opportunity?
Well, I guess the biggest opportunity is to make the world a little bit better, right? By decreasing pollution in the area. So the opportunity here is, yes.
Mhm. Yes, and the supporting actions for that are to, can we say something more than just put the system in place?
Well, it's not that easy in reality, because estimating CO2 usage is not easy, for instance, and therefore creating a system which is accurate enough to provide meaningful results by itself is a challenge. Think about how many different types of cars there are, how many different types of trains, how many.
Yes, absolutely. Agreed. It's not an easy feat. I didn't want to say what you're building here is simple. It's certainly not.
No. That wasn't my point.
I know.
Just saying it's not a given. Just by putting the system in place doesn't mean that it's either accurate or it's by itself it is pushing people to behave better.
Yes, agreed. So what's maybe the most
another supporting action is, of course, designing the UX in a way which teaches users to behave in a certain way, right? Yeah.
I don't know if that's a word. If not, I just made it one.
Educational, instructive, I think it's the same.
Yes. Educational, that's the word I was looking for. Good. So to take back a step from the system instance we're talking about, back to the methodical level, this summary of threats, opportunities, and mitigating and supporting actions is essentially a management summary for decision-making. So after you sat together with a number of stakeholders in a workshop for a few hours to have discussed these dimensions of sustainability, you come up with this beautiful report. And so what are you going to do with it? You don't necessarily want to have to walk management through all of these or even through all of that diagram. Like that goes into the appendix essentially of what you're going to reporting back to management. What management is really interested in is these, to say, here are the main results of what we have identified. Here's how to make sure that that does not happen. And here's how we make sure that that can happen.
Yes. Plus, there is, of course, part of my job as an architect, which is putting a price tag on that. Because management will ask me, how much does it cost to do it?
Yes.
It doesn't need to be exactly only price. It can be effort. It can be, but yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's not a price tag in monetary way. It's costs for the actions in whichever way that cost incurs. Absolutely agreed. And that brings us to a summary of this workshop. So at the very end, what we've talked about is the potential impacts of a socio-technical system if we are to run it over an extended period of time with potentially a lot of users. And we have a couple of publications out where we explain this using the example of Airbnb. We have done one with a startup that does business models. We have one with an overview of a number of systems across different application domains. We've done this with software companies. We've done this with a company that creates embedded systems, with one that created a racetrack. So we have a number of case studies out there that you can read up on for examples. And our mission is to support stakeholders with different viewpoints to have these conversations on possible effects of their systems on sustainability. That way, one, we can raise awareness so people have it in mind when designing systems, and two, it gives you a comprehensive, and now I'm saying comprehensive despite the fact that we know this doesn't cover possibly everything that comes up, and it gives you a pretty decent baseline because we had a lot of things come up today that otherwise may have not come through to that extent unless we are specifically having a conversation about this topic. And you can read up on the definitions as a reminder for the dimensions of sustainability and the 3 orders of effect on this last page. And it's also a summary of the topic areas of each dimension and of what that diagram can look like. And if we want to zoom out here a little bit, this is what we've created in just about 3 hours, which is a pretty decent deep dive in terms of the sustainability impacts of one particular system. And mind you, we've spent about 45 minutes talking about what is this method good for and talking about some detailed questions around effect definitions. So I hope that this time has been beneficial to you. And I am happy to take.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm happy to take a few more questions as we have a few minutes left.
Yeah, actually, I have one question. This is Chinli here. First, I kind of want to echo that, yeah, this is actually also very useful for me. It definitely gave me a kind of a new framework to look at the things about the system from different angle. I have a question about, you know, that I guess I try to say kind of the limit or boundary when we really try to look at this sustainability. I mean, that's definitely the right way to do, but I think there's also need to be bounded by certain conditions. For example, now we are talking about this transportation system, and we know that we're going to grow and probably to 2 million. If we don't have this condition, it go to 10 million or maybe even more, I feel the system complexity will be different. That potential impact the system development time and the cost and etc. So when we talking about framework, is there some way we actually should define what actually will the boundary when we using this framework in terms of how the scale the system will grow and all the time, the duration, or maybe the geographic, you know, expansion, all those things, when we actually consider the framework?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so the scoping is done over here in the very first step when we talk about what is the current vision of the service, and that includes what are the boundary conditions. So for example, for this metropolitan area, we know that it contains about 2 to 3 million people. So that is our rough scoping for this analysis. Now, if we know we're developing this for a population of 10 million, then that should go here into the boundary conditions as well.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And I just thinking there may be some other factors, like for example, you know, how long we want this system to in place, like either like 5 year or maybe 30 year or 100 year. And those things could also be a factor to bound the system, right?
Right, which is why that is addressed in the scalability of the technical dimension. So
right.
That was one, and then we had the time frame of 8 years as well in the maintainability aspect of the technical dimension.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good. Are there further questions?
If nobody pops up, I just wanted to thank you in the meantime, and tell you that I'm planning to try this with my colleagues for some of the next opportunities and see how it goes.
That would be wonderful. You are so welcome, and thank you so much for providing this example. It's way more fun to talk through a new example as opposed to me warming up the ones that we've spoken about before, and to have a stakeholder who's like, oh yeah, I know all the details about this one. And especially if it's a public one that we're allowed to share across workshop participants. So thank you very much for this. It's been super helpful. And we would love to get some feedback on, yeah, what your outcome is when you use this with colleagues.
Yes, why not?
Okay, wonderful. then we're going to wrap it up here. I thank you all again, and stay in touch. Have a great rest of your day and be well.